It happened during a quiet family dinner. The dining room was warm, elegant, and filled with soft light. Three people sat at the table. Arthur Langford, one of the most respected businessmen in the city, his 8-year-old daughter, Sophie, and the woman who had taken care of Sophie since she was 5. Her name was Elena. For years, Elena had been part of their routine. She helped with homework, walked Sophie to school, stayed with her during nights when Arthur worked late. But that night, something was different. Arthur suddenly stood up from his chair. His face was tense, and he pointed directly at Elena. "You took it." The room went silent. Elena looked at him in disbelief. What?" Arthur's voice hardened. "My watch." Then he said something that changed everything. "It was on the table 5 minutes ago." But before Elena could defend herself, Sophie quietly spoke, and what she said would make Arthur realize he had just made a terrible mistake. Arthur Langford had built his life around precision. His company ran like a machine. Everything had a system, a structure, a rule, and the same logic guided his personal life. After his wife passed away 3 years earlier, Arthur struggled to balance work and fatherhood. He tried to manage everything himself, but eventually he accepted he needed help. That was when Elena entered their lives. She wasn't loud, she wasn't demanding, but she had a calm presence that Sophie responded to immediately. Within weeks, Sophie trusted her completely. And over time, Elena became the person Sophie talked to about things she didn't even tell her father. Arthur appreciated Elena's reliability, but there was something about their closeness that always made him slightly uncomfortable. He couldn't explain it. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was guilt for not being present enough. Still, for 3 years, their arrangement worked perfectly. Until the night his watch disappeared. The watch wasn't just expensive. It had belonged to Arthur's father, a silver watch he wore every day. He had placed it beside his plate before dinner, and now it was gone. Arthur searched the table, the floor, his pockets. Nothing. His eyes slowly moved toward Elena. "You were the only one standing near the table." Elena looked stunned. "I was bringing Sophie her water." Arthur's voice grew colder. "Then explain where the watch is." Sophie looked from her father to Elena, confused. Elena took a slow breath. "I didn't take anything." Arthur crossed his arms. "I'm not accusing you lightly." The tension in the room grew heavy. Elena slowly placed her small bag on the table. "You can check." Arthur hesitated. For a moment, something inside him told him this was wrong. But frustration won. "Open it." Elena opened the bag. Inside were only simple things. A notebook, keys, a phone. Nothing else. Arthur's jaw tightened. "Then you must have hidden it somewhere." Elena's voice trembled slightly now. "I would never do that." But Arthur was already convinced. You'd be surprised what people are capable of. "Dad." Sophie's voice was small but clear. Arthur sighed. "Sophie, this doesn't concern you." But Sophie didn't sit down. She stood beside her chair, looking very serious. "You already found it." Arthur turned. "What?" Sophie pointed toward him. "You put it away." Arthur shook his head. "No, I didn't." But Sophie didn't move. Yes, you did. The room went quiet again. Elena watched silently. Arthur forced a small laugh. Sophie, I think you're confused. But Sophie shook her head again. You did it earlier. Arthur frowned. When? Sophie answered softly. After the phone call. Arthur's expression slowly changed. What phone call? Sophie spoke carefully. The one where the doctor said you should rest. Arthur froze. The doctor. Earlier that afternoon, he had received a call about his recent stress tests. The doctor warned him he had been forgetting things, misplacing objects, working too much. Sophie continued, You took off the watch. You said you didn't want to lose it again. Arthur's face slowly lost color. Sophie pointed toward the coat hanging behind him. You put it in your jacket pocket. Arthur turned slowly, his heart suddenly beating harder. He walked toward the coat. His hand moved into the pocket, and there it was, the watch, exactly where Sophie said. Arthur stood still for several seconds. The room was completely silent. He looked at Elena. She hadn't moved. Her expression wasn't angry. It was simply hurt. Arthur walked back to the table. His voice was quieter now. I accused you. Elena nodded gently. Yes. Arthur ran a hand through his hair. Why didn't you say anything earlier? Elena hesitated, then answered honestly, Because you looked scared. Arthur blinked. What do you mean? You've been forgetting things lately. I didn't want to make you feel worse. The realization hit Arthur harder than any accusation. She had protected his dignity, even when he had just humiliated her. Arthur looked at Sophie, then at Elena, and for the first time that evening, the anger in his chest was replaced by something else. Shame. He stood up slowly. Elena, I'm sorry. The words sounded heavier than he expected. You didn't deserve that. Elena gave a small nod. Sophie told the truth. Arthur looked at his daughter. Thank you. Sophie smiled slightly. Then Arthur did something he rarely allowed himself to do. He sat back down at the table, not as the powerful businessman everyone admired, but simply as a father. And in that quiet moment, he realized something important. Sometimes the person we trust the least in a moment of anger is the one who has been protecting us all along. If you want more emotional and cinematic stories like this, consider subscribing to Midnight Tales. New stories are coming soon. Some stories only happen at midnight,